Hey, what's up? So we are here to start the first tutorial on installing a lamp stack on Amazon Linux 2. So before you do this, make sure that you have a key pair, make sure that you have a security group. I've made one that just has SSH access. You want to make sure you have your PEM file, make sure you chmod that to 400. And go ahead and create an instance, put it in that security group, use the existing key pair, and then just do a check that you can log in, and that's really the only prerequisite for this. If you have questions about doing that, just look at my previous videos, or you can read this documentation. So we did the preparation, the prerequisites, so now we're going to prepare the lamp server. So we connect the instance and want to make sure everything's up to date. So we're just going to do a quick yum update, and that can take a little bit sometimes. And then we're going to install MariaDB, PHP 7.2, and yeah, it looks like that's probably it. And then we're going to cat etc system release and just check out the version, I'm assuming. Let's see if you receive an error. Yeah, that's just to check your version. So as soon as this is done, we're going to install this new stuff. We're not at a point in these videos yet where we're going to be using something called Bootstrap, but in the future what you could do is you have two options. You can bootstrap this so that it basically runs a script that does these commands when the instance is created, or you can make an Amazon machine image, an AMI, out of this instance, so it's already there. So when you build it, it's just there, and there's not even a bootstrap script. There's other more complicated things, cloud formation, things like that. But anyways, so we did the step 2, we did step 3. So for step 4, we're going to install the actual MariaDB server. I'm just copying and pasting this stuff, super easy stuff. So that's going to install, and then we can actually look at the version of MariaDB server. If you do yum info package name, totally not necessary, but you can play with it, especially if you're learning Linux. And then we'll go ahead and start with systemctl or system control HTTPD, which is your Apache service. And then you want to enable it, which makes sure that if you restart, it starts on the reboot. All right. So for you Linux newbies, it's going to, when you enable a service, the service actually, what it does is it says create a symlink from this file to this file. So in your systemd file, this service is going to be connected to this systemd file service, so that when the instance is started, it reads from this directory to make sure that it's starting all the services it's supposed to start. So then if you reboot, it'll start with the server. Okay, so now we need to add a security rule to allow HTTP traffic on port 80. Okay, so in order to do that, we're going to have to edit our security group. Super easy. So get to the right screen. This instance is currently using this security group, which we can see just allows port 22. So I'm actually going to come into this security group under inbound rules, edit it, add a rule, custom TCP. You could put port 80, all that stuff. Or you can do HTTP and it does it for you. So if you don't know your ports, like you want to do LDAP and you don't know that's 389, that's one way to do it. Or you can just type it. So HTTP port 80, my source is going to be my IP on that subnet CIDR range, because my ISP likes to change my IP address. So make sure you do that. If you put your exact IP without a /32/24 or whatever, it'll use the IP that you're using right now, and if your IP changes, and you won't be able to access your system. Alright, so now we got port 80 opened up. to myself. So we got that done. Choose a link for security group. So we already did all of that. Test your web server. So in a web browser, type the public DNS or public IP of your instance. And we should be seeing the Apache test page. So if I come back to my instance here, you'll see under details, you'll see a public IPv4 DNS or IP address. You can just copy that. Like here, I'll show you the IP address. Put that in. It's going to default to port 80 on HTTP, and I should see the Apache page. And we do. So there's your test page. So now we have a web server running Apache. So that's the end of that part. So it says HTTPD serves the files are kept in a directory called the Apache document root, which you'll hear me say var www HTML because I don't want to say www all the time. So this is by default owned by root. In order for us to use it, we need to be able to modify the ownership. So the easiest way to do that is you can add the EC2 user to the Apache group. So the Apache group that has permissions on that directory allow this user to do it. So instead of having to sudo, you use the principle of least privilege here, and you want to use something called role-based access control, or RBAC. And so in this case, it's a role. What you're really doing is you're inheriting the permissions of the Apache group, and it's delegating that to the EC2 user. This is the best way to do this. Try to do things without being root. It's just easier that way. It says log out and back in again, pick up the new group. You can do that, or you can source your profile, but we'll just follow directions. So we're going to exit, and then I'm going to log back in. And then if you look at, it says verify your membership, you can look at groups, and you'll see here EC2 user, ADM, wheel, Apache, and systemd journal. Okay, so now we need to change the group ownership of var www and anything that's in there to the Apache group. So what we're going to do is we're going to use sudo, and we're going to chown or change ownerships recursively for the EC2 user and Apache group to var www. So that's going to change var www, and the dash capital R is going to recursively assign the same ownership to any contents that would be below this directory structure. So you need to give it write permissions. So we're going to give it 2775, and we're going to find the var www type, and then we're going to execute this as well. And then give write permissions recursively on this and its directories. Oops. With 664. So now EC2 user and anybody else that gets put in the Apache group can add, delete, edit files in the Apache document root. Again, this means var www HTML, enabling you to add content such as static website or PHP application, which we will do a little bit of. So secure your web browser. This is optional. You want to secure it. There is another tutorial I'll do next on doing that, so I'm not going to do that right now. We'll do that in the next video. So now let's do a test. So if we echo this PHP info into this file, it's going to take this string of text and it's going to put it in a file called phpinfo.php. So what that does is it gives us the ability to go to this directory, because this var www HTML, the reason they call it Apache root is because this basically is var www HTML. So if you just add this guy on the end of it, now we can see the PHP version, which is kind of cool, because now we're seeing that this is starting to work. So the next thing you're going to do, if you don't see it, blah blah blah, okay, is we're going to delete this file with the remove command. you should not be telling people what your versions of software are, because if somebody were just out looking for a good time, they could look at this and go, hey, you're on an old version of Apache, you're using 7.2 or 5, whatever. I know an exploit for that, and then they can use this against you. So you want to broadcast as little information about you as possible. Think of it as like PII, but for like your system. So you definitely don't want to broadcast that. So we're going to remove this file that we just created, and then we're going to secure the little database server that we made. So we installed MariaDB. So now we're going to start it. So now it's starting. And then we're going to run this MySQL Secure Installation. So there's a couple things you need to do. Basically, you just need to say yes to everything. We need to type a current root password. It doesn't have a password, so you just hit enter. So that's a little trick that you'll need to know. So like right here, watch. Enter current password for root. Well, you hit enter for none if you don't have one. Well, we don't have one. Set root password. What it says is say yes, and then we can type in a password. So I'm going to go ahead and hit yes, and then I'm going to type a password, and then I'm going to retype the same password, and hopefully they match. They don't match. So I was talking and typing at the same time. Cool. Remove anonymous users. You do yes. You want to do that. Disallow root remotely. Always a good idea. Remove test database and access to it. Yes, because that's also not a secure thing to do. Reload privilege tables now. Yes. Thank you for using MariaDB. And then we're done. So now we're going to go ahead and stop the database. This is optional. If you don't plan to use it, you can stop it. And if you want to use it, you can enable it. So we're not going to stop it, but we are going to enable it. So now our database and our Apache service will run if the system reboots. So the optional step 4 is to install phpMyAdmin, which I'm going to do. So first thing you need to do is install the dependencies. A lot of copying and pasting, you guys. This is super easy stuff. We're going to restart Apache. Super quick. We're going to restart phpFPM. And then we're going to go to our Apache document root. What's in here? Nothing. And we're going to do a wget on this tarball. What on earth is this? Well, this is a package with the latest phpAdmin release. phpAdmin's kind of cool because you can actually use it to go in and as a UI to do everything, which is kind of nice. So now that we have it, we're going to make a folder, and then we're going to extract this tarball into that folder with the cunning use of copy and paste. And then we're going to clean up the tarball because you don't want to leave stuff around. You should always leave things better than how you left them. If it's not running, you can start it. Ours is running, and then we should be able to go to the phpAdmin console on this public DNS like that and get a screen. Now there is a default username and password to this. So to log in, you use root and then your MySQL password that we created. So I'm going to go ahead and try that. So I'm going to go root. I'll put in my fancy little password. Hit go. And now we have my phpAdmin set up, which is kind of cool. So now we can manage everything, the information schema for the database, the MySQL database, performance schema. You won't probably touch these are all defaults. But if you do create a new table, you'll have all that stuff in here. So super handy. So now we log in. Installation must be configured before you put in the service, blah, blah, blah. To start with a minimal configuration, use your favorite text editor and create a new file. And then copy the contents into here. So what is this saying? It says your installation must still be configured before you put it into service. They suggest you begin by manually creating the configuration file as follows. Start with a minimal config file. Use your favorite text editor, I'll just use VI, to create a new file and copy the contents of this into it. So what is that? Well, I don't really know. So we'll have to figure that out. The config file itself, I'm not a PHP guy if you can't tell. I bet you it's in here. So you want to find config sample inc php, which is probably this guy. So it says what you want to do is copy, make a file, right? And then copy this into it. And then save the file as this. Okay, so that we don't have, so I'll just vi, what do they want us to name it? Config inc php, config.inc.php. Except you have to spell it correctly. Cool. And then I'm just going to insert the contents. Oh, for the love. Let's just cat this sucker so we can look at it. Look at all this junk, right? So rather than do all that, I'm just going to copy this file. We're just going to copy this guy into this guy. So now if I cat that file that we just made, that has the same puke of output. You save the file in the phpMyAdmin directory that contains index.php. So let's review. So the config file that they give you is just a sample, right? So you're going to take the sample content and you're going to put it in your file. You're going to save it with this name in the phpMyAdmin directory, which is where we are, right? That contains index.php. What is index.php? Index.php is like your default page. So if somebody just goes to your http:// your IP address, your public IP address, what they're going to see is index.php. So this guy right here. So if I cat index, you're going to see this is what it has in it. It just says use this PHP routing to blah blah blah. So this is what it's doing. And notice it says require once root path libraries common.inc.php. So what we did was we took this sample PHP configuration file and we just made a real PHP config file using this sample configuration. That'll enable you to have PHP put into service. So the next step says refer to post file creation instructions and using the setup script section of the phpAdmin installations for additional setup. So for this, it says instead of manually editing this, you can use the setup feature. So you can open your browser, visit the location where you did this, visit /setup suffix. So let's try that. So if we go to here, there should be a /setup, or maybe it's phpAdmin /setup. Config already exists. Setup is disabled. Cool. So we don't need that. So if you don't want to do it manually like I just did, you can just run this setup and it does this basically the same thing. We don't need to troubleshoot because everything's working correctly. So we can just take off. And that is a quick down and dirty through the tutorial. We're going to keep building on this. So next I'll do the SSL TLS and eventually go through WordPress and all that other stuff. So anyways, that is it. So feel free to go through the tutorial yourself. And if you have any questions, let me know. But yeah, I was just basically going through the tutorial. So if you went through it and you had any issues, you can kind of see what I did. Feel free to pause it or whatever, and then you're on your own. So good luck.